Okay. The last part of this that I want to get into, and this is something that this topic has been sparked up a couple of times over the course of the last few months. When we talk about Dwight getting snubbed from the All 75 team, and then really just recently, on Twitter, who is the greatest Magic player of all time? And I think people, especially the folks that were not around to watch Dwight during his prime, forget that Dwight Howard was legitimately one of the best players in the league. Like one of the top 5, like inarguably one of the top 5 best players in the league. Is Dwight Howard the greatest Magic player of all time? Kevin, start.
So one of the big things that I brought up in this conversation on Twitter was, to me and to the vast majority of people out there is a difference between best and greatest. There is a difference. I don't care. There's a couple clowns out there, and I'll just call them clowns, because if you're the only people saying it, then 98% of other people are disagreeing with you, then you're the clown. There's a difference between greatest and best. Best can be like the most talented, the most gifted. The best player in the history of the Orlando Magic is Shaquille O'Neal. Like, you can't argue with that. Like, if you look at his body of work over the course of his career, and even the talent when he was in Orlando, he was the best player in Magic history. The greatest player in Magic history is Dwight Howard, because, like you said, for that era, he was one of the best players in the league, and he had an era. Like, he was here for 2004 to 12, 8 years, and the vast majority of those were winning seasons, took us to the finals, took us to our best regular season ever the next year in the Eastern Conference Finals, won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Like, that's insane. Yeah, back to back to back. Come on. I mean, like, it's ridiculous. And so, for me, he's the greatest of all time, as far as Magic players go. I think probably, like I said, Shaq is probably better. His tenure wasn't the same. And T-Mac was definitely the best scorer in Magic history, but as far as greatest, for me, it's Dwight. I do not understand this debate. I'll just be honest. It's not close to me. Like, it's just not close.
Before we go to Luke, this is the example that I think is like the best like support to your argument. Is you would probably say that LeBron James is one of the most talented Lakers of all time, but are you putting him over Magic Johnson or Kobe Bryant as the greatest Lakers ever? Of course you wouldn't.
Right.
So it's a different
I know the
conversation.
Toronto Raptors are a very touchy subject right now with the Orlando Magic fan base, but they're probably the best example of this ever, because the best player in Raptors history, there's a list of guys. Could be Kawhi. Vince was there. T-Mac was there. But the greatest Raptor of all time is Kyle Lowry. You ask any Raptors fans, and I can't stand the guy. Let's be very clear. That guy is, but you ask any Raptor fan, and Kyle Lowry is the greatest Raptor player of all time. He's not the best. Are you kidding me? No. Anyway, that's what I want to say.
Yeah. I mean, he's absolutely, Dwight is the greatest Magic player, the greatest player to ever put on the pinstripes, to win the dunk contest, to win 3 defensive player, back to back to back, to do what he did, take that team to the finals. I mean, what he did in the amount of years, that is the biggest part, right? Like, that's the biggest part of the argument. It's like you said, Shaq, talent-wise, the best. But when it comes to longevity, and like Kevin alluded to or said, like, Dwight was an Iron Man. Dwight, wasn't missing chunks of the season. He was always playing. He wasn't just always playing. He was always putting up video game numbers night in and night out, whether it was his rebound total or his blocks or his points. Like, he was just through the roof, the anchor to the Magic for as long as he was with the organization. It stinks that it ended the way it did, and maybe that's the reason that some people won't admit that he's the greatest Magic player of all time. But I think that it's a no-brainer. I mean, I think that all you have to do is list the accolades side by side. What did they do when they were on the team at the time? And Dwight checks all the boxes. Dwight is the greatest Magic player of all time.
I think a lot of the debate about, because comes down to two guys. It's Shaq or it's Dwight. Any other conversation, I'm sorry, I will not hear. Like, Tracy McGrady is my favorite player of all time in the history of the world, but it's Dwight and it's Shaq if you're going to have the conversation at all. So what I'd like to do is just kind of go through a list of both of them very impressive, resumes with the Orlando Magic. I'll go through Shaq first. So 1992 through 96, 4 seasons. So 8,019 points, which comes to 27.2 points per game. 3,691 rebounds, which comes to 12.5 rebounds per game. 824 blocks, 2.8 blocks per game. 716 assists, 2.4 assists per game. 243 steals, 0.8 steals per game. 4-time All-Star, 1-time scoring leader, 3-time All-NBA, 1 second team, 2 third NBA teams, 4 consecutive years of finishing top 10 in MVP voting, 1993 through 1996, led the Magic to the 1995 Eastern Conference Finals championship and into the NBA Finals at 22 years old. In terms of all-time Magic accolades, he is 6th in points, 3rd in rebounds, 2nd in blocks, 3rd in free throws made, 4th in win shares. Incredible resume. Dwight's blows his out of the water. So Dwight, in terms of points, almost 4,000 more points, 11,435 points, 18.4 points per game, more than doubles Shaq's rebounds, 8,072 rebounds, 13 rebounds a game, almost, not quite double, but about almost 500 more blocks than Shaq, 1,344, 2.2 blocks per game, 200 more assists, 935, 1.5 assists per game, and more than doubles Shaq's steals, 626 steals, 1 steal per game. Now, this is where we really start to separate in terms of league accolades. So 6-time All-Star, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, back-to-back-to-back. The only player to do that ever. There is one list. It is Dwight Howard. 4-time rebound leader. Shaq never did that in Orlando. 2-time block leader. Shaq never did that in Orlando. Now, I understand, the league was different. You had guys like, David Robinson and Hakeem Olajuwon and all these other guys. But Dwight, 6-time All-NBA, 5 first teams, 1 third team, 5-time All-Defensive Team, 4 consecutive years finishing top 5 in MVP voting. So for 4 straight years, wow, Dwight Howard was one of the absolute best players in the NBA. That was 2008 through 2011. 2009 Eastern Conference Finals champion, 23 years old. He is 1st in minutes, 3rd in games, 1st in points, 1st in rebounds, 4th in steals, 1st in blocks, 1st in free throws, 1st in win shares.
Like, what are we doing? What is this conversation? Like, come on. Come on. This is what, can I just honestly, one more thing. Someone on Twitter, one of the 2 clowns, talked about per game. Like, oh, points per game, Shaq, look at the rebounds per game, whatever. Like, okay, if you're going like per game, like Jeff Doughton Jr., he averages 1 preseason game winner per game. It's like, I don't mean that to like harp on Jeff Doughton Jr., but like that's like, if it's, you can't, per game, like, and we're talking about the grand scheme of like this franchise, that's foolish. Like, what are we doing? Like, that's crazy.
And there's something else that I feel like we do need to mention. Shaq's cultural impact on the Magic organization and the city of Orlando is a massive deal. Like, Orlando is not the metropolitan area that Correct. It is without Shaquille
Correct.
O'Neal putting the Magic on the map. The Orlando Magic's cultural, importance and relevance is nothing without Shaq putting on the pinstripes.
Totally true. The Magic are not in Orlando right now without Dwight. That's the other side of that coin. Because the Magic were going to leave in the mid-2000s, in theory. But that was a very strong rumor. They were going to Kansas City or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And when Dwight came and helped make the team better again, literally, he's the reason the Amway Center exists. Literally, put the Amway Center.
It is the house that Dwight built.
The house that Dwight built. So, like, what you said is totally true about Shaq. Dwight, kind of took it to the next level. Like, he continued that. But you're totally right about Shaq.
Yeah, I just don't feel like there's is much of a debate here. It's about longevity. It's about what you accomplished here at the absolute peak of their powers. If there's one guy that I need for one game in Magic history, I'm taking early 90s Shaq, like just flat out. But if you're going to tell me you're either going to get Shaq for 4 years or you're going to get Dwight for 8 years, I'm taking Dwight for 8 years, and I'm not even thinking about it at all.